Everybody has a story. The other day, I was there on a Sunday lunch, and it was so beautiful because there were some people, of course, who didn't know anyone, but there were some people, it was like a party almost. People were going from table to table. And I think that's something we really missed in COVID when restaurants were closed, was that spontaneous meeting of a friend. You walk in and, oh, there's someone I haven't seen for a long time, or come and sit with me for a bit, or how are you? And I think we're all in a room, happy to be together. If you'd asked me before COVID what was important in the city, I would say hospitals or bookstores or parks or obviously schools, museums. I'm not sure I would have listed restaurants, but I think when we didn't have them, people really missed them.
I don't know what you do to people, but I'll tell you what you did to me. You brought me in, we made a meal together, we were eating the meal, and all of a sudden I felt like I was transformed back into my house of my upbringing, and we were talking about things that really moved me. And I brought up Jack Gruber, who's now passed. He was a Holocaust survivor. He always waved his hand in front of his food about the abundance he had now versus what was going on in the camp. And I'm bringing it up again today for a reason. There's something about you that you give to people, and it's the generosity of your heart, and it's the warmth of your personality, but it's the combination of all these things, and somehow it ties back into their ancestral home. I don't know how you do it, because you're doing it for people of all different walks of life and all different types of professions, but I feel like they come into your zip code, they come into your zone, and they plug into what you are about, which is love and grace and kindness and generosity and obviously great food. Well, welcome to Open Book. I am your host, Anthony Scaramucci. I have one of my favorite people today, my podcast, Lady Ruth Rogers, who we simply call Ruthie. Anybody that's lucky enough to know her calls her Ruthie. So I'm going to call you Ruthie in this podcast, if you don't mind, Lady Ruth Rogers, fellow American. A renowned chef, opened the River Cafe, which is still one of the hardest restaurants to get into in London. She opened it in 1987, and it's a name forever associated with Italian food in the United Kingdom, but also other dishes. But I will say this, in addition to becoming a dear friend, I was on your incredible podcast, and Ruthie has a podcast called Ruthie's Table 4, which is one of the most intimate, most fun podcasts. And you have a list of luminaries that I cannot believe that come onto your podcast, which is
you being
tribute.
One of them.
Well,
you being one of them.
You're being
Very
too generous to me, but you have several incredible cookbooks centered around the River Cafe. And this is the reason why I'm bringing you on today. I want to talk about those books, but I also want to talk about how I met you. I met you through Jason Fox. If you remember that, he's the Special Forces Navy SEAL. He brought me in, and then you were kind enough to invite me on your podcast. But I want to go into your origin story, if you don't mind, as it was almost opened as a canteen to feed staff from your husband, Lord Rogers, who had an architecture practice nearby, but it morphed into one of the most famous restaurants in the world, your restaurant. So tell us the origin story.
Well, the origin story, first of all, thank you. I'm so happy to be here with you. You are one of the great luminaries, if that name applies to the podcast. And we had such a good time. And what we found is that talking about food, talking about recipes, talking about one's childhood and how we ate opens up a whole area of memory. And it was a good conversation. We all loved you in the restaurant. We love when you come in. You always say hello to the chefs, to the waiters. You make contact, and that's important to us. So thank you, and it's great to be here. How did we start? Well, I come from upstate New York, from Woodstock, actually. And I went to London when I was in my second year of college. And then in the 70s, Richard and I moved to Paris because he was the architect with Renzo Piano of the Centre Pompidou, the Beaubourg. And when, to skip over quite a lot, there's a lot to talk about those years in Paris in terms of food, in terms of books, in terms of memories. We came back with the idea that we didn't want to have an architectural office in a building in the middle of the center of the city. We wanted to be somehow a community. Richard particularly wanted to form a community, found these warehouses on the Thames, and bought them with his partners. And the one thing that was missing was, the most important part of a community is a restaurant, a place to eat where people can sit and talk and think and dream and trade stories. And so we put the word out. I was a graphic designer who'd been working in the office in London and in Paris. And we put the word out that we, were interested in doing a small cafe restaurant. And the applications came in. And I remember I was sitting with Richard and we were skiing. And I said, the only thing worse than not having a place to eat would be to have a mediocre one. Maybe I should do it. And it literally was those sort of few words that changed everything in our lives. To make, again, a long story short, Rose Gray, who was an old friend of ours and had gone to New York to work with Keith McNally, but now with Balthazar and Pastis, had a club called Nell's. And she came back and she really wanted to work. Oh, we had a guest. Come and say hello, Austin. You come up. We have a guest. Austin Butler is here, who's staying with me. Can he come and say hello?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Austin.
And he's
but Austin actually knows my son.
And you know Anthony's son, do you?
So Austin, you may remember my son.
You're doing a podcast right now?
Austin, you may remember my son, AJ Scaramucci. He absolutely adores you and says that you were someone he hopes he can stay in long-term touch with,
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I really, what a special young man you raised. I've heard so many wonderful things about you. I'm so pleased to meet you.
Well, same here. God bless you.
Well, I don't want to interrupt what you guys are doing here.
We all see. She's the O positive friend, right? She's friends with everybody, right?
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
We all roads point back to Ruthie Austin, right?
It's so true, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah, she's the hub of it all.
I know what you're saying because I can't hear you. Okay.
All right,
Nice
nice
to
to see
Lots
you.
of love. Good to see you.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring you that.
Thank
All
you
right,
so
see,
much.
It's so apropos to this podcast because that's you. Every person that walks through the city of London comes to see you either in your house or at your restaurant. But I got to meet Tom. If you don't mind me name dropping, I got to meet Tom Ford in your house. Of course, I told him I'm too big for his suits. I'm too wide. I can only fit in his sunglasses, but he told me he would make me a suit.
That
so I
was
got to
very
take him
funny.
up on
Take him up on it.
I should take him up.
So basically, we did the we had the applications, and then so Rose Gray came back from New York, and she wanted to open a restaurant. So I got in touch with her, and we went to look at this site, which was a tiny little space, and where the warehouses were. You could just about fit, 6 tables in. And we thought, well, let's do it. I'd never cooked in a restaurant. I was a home cook for lots of children. Rose had very little experience, just working a bit with Keith and Brian McNally. And so 2 women kind of out of the center who were not professionals, but loved to cook and loved people, said, let's do it. We bought all our kitchen equipment from, used places. We went to buy tables and chairs from the reject shop. Richard helped us with the architecture, if you could call it that. And we opened up a little place called the River Cafe, where you could either have sandwiches, in which case either Rose or I would make the sandwiches, or a pasta and maybe it was a piece of lamb and some cake. And we would just share the responsibilities. And that was in 1987, 38 years ago. And from there, we just grew very, very organically, very slowly to, I guess on Sunday, we did 250 covers for lunch. And now we can fit in, a lot more tables. We have 30 chefs. We have, altogether, we employ about 140 people. And we've written 13 cookbooks. So, but slowly.
Okay, but there's something you're doing. You have a personal magnetism that it's hard to really explain unless you're in your presence. So how did we get this personal magnetism? I know that you were a Woodstock girl. I know you're the product of the late 60s and the early 70s. But there's a level of authenticity that you have that it's not just the people in the UK, but it's people around the world are drawn to? Why is that? What is it about you?
Oh, well, that would have to be for somebody else to say. I can't possibly talk about myself. I think I was brought up with a lot of love. It's quite simple as that. My parents were, very kind. They were very patient. I had a sense of family. It was a house in the country. My father was a doctor. My mother was a librarian. And it was a place where people gathered. People seemed to come to our house more than we went to other people's houses. And I think it was nurture. It was, just a lot of kindness around me, I suppose. And then I entered into a family when I married Richard, which was the same. He came from an Italian family. He was born in Florence. His mother was from Trieste. And I think that sense of community, social responsibility, and when people work for you, you take care of them in a way that is responsible, nurturing. We also obviously run a business which has to have rigor and has to have responsibility. But behind that are the values that I think we started when we were opening the River Cafe are still there, 38 years later.
I know you're working away. I mean, you are a perfectionist, and it shows up every night in the food that you're serving. But why do you think Italian food? I mean, I have my opinion as a Italian American.
Yeah.
But why do you think Italian food resonates in nearly every culture? Is it just the taste, or is there something to do with the value system behind it, or a combination of the two? What do you think?
I'd say it's probably a combination of the two, that people learn to cook through their family. They eat at home very often. They have, if they're not in the city center, they have a garden, even if it just has one lemon tree in Amalfi or an olive oil tree in Tuscany. I think that there's it's actually quite simple Italian food, that it isn't masked. It isn't hidden under a very, thick sauce, although I love sauces in French food. I think when you take a piece of fish and you grill it, and you find the local herbs and you put them over it with some olive oil and lemon, the integrity of the ingredient has to be there, because that's what you're eating. I remember one of the most memorable things I've eaten in Italy, and I promise it's true, is when I had a bruschetta in Florence in November, and the bread was just perfectly grilled, and there's a tiny bit of garlic rubbed on it. But the really incredible taste in my mouth, which I can remember, was the olive oil. And I kept thinking, what else do they put in this olive oil? Why does it have that peppery taste? And of course, it had been on the trees just weeks, And so there was a sense that and I think that Italians really have, it's also very regional Italian food. And I think that comes from the history of Italy not being united. So, if you were, now it's probably different, but if I was in Venice, it would be hard to have, maybe cannelli beans that were grown in Florence, with that chickpeas. Okay, say chickpeas that were from Puglia. And if you were in Florence, you might not get the kind of risotto you would have in Venice. And so I think that dignity and that perfection of just local ingredients cooked in the season is so vital to Italian cooking. And it's also forgiving. It's generous. You dish it out. You make a pasta. You make enough for, if you're cooking for 5, you make enough for 10. If you're cooking, for 10, you made enough for 15. There's more. There's another seat at the table. And I think that goes through a lot of cultures. I think you'll find that in Greece. You'll find it in France. You'll find it in most places. But there's something about the warmth of Italy that I think is very immediate. Do you?
Well, I think you're expressing it really well. I actually I bought some of your cookbooks on Amazon, and I flipped through them with my wife, and she said something that I'd like to get you to react to. She said, "Wow," she said, "I love this cookbook because less is more."
Yeah.
Ruthie has figured out that it's simple base ingredients. Less is more. Is that part of your style? That's something that she identified? Is that something that you take with you in other aspects of your life?
It definitely is. And I think the less is more might be from the architect Mies van der Rohe. who was a great architect in the Bauhaus. And it was a reaction to the complexity of architecture and design before that, saying you could simplify it to, a few columns and sheets of glass and maybe one story, that you had less was more. And in food, I would say less is more. And I think your wife is, really expresses it. And it's, we write the menu every day for whatever meal the chef is on. So we do the lunch menu is written in the morning and the dinner menu is written in the afternoon. And very often when I'm there writing the menu, I put, whatever, I design a plate, with whatever it is. And very often I'll just go and take one part of it off. It's either it was a vegetable and the beans. Well, let's just have the spinach. We don't need the borlotti. Or if it's carne crudo with a crostino, we don't need something on the crostino. It depends. I mean, obviously, food is also an explosion of flavors. It's contrast of flavors. So it can be both.
I mean, I love your menu. When I come in, the problem with your menu, I want to eat every single thing on the menu.
I hope so. Well, it's not a very long menu, so you could.
Well, that's my point. It's a very simplistic, very it's just great. Some of it's peasant food, some of it is northern food. It's a blend of the two. But I guess the question I have is, there one thing that's been on the menu from 1987 till today? If you had one thing, or if you mixed up the menu, you sort of try to change it every year or seasonally?
Well, I think there are a few things. I do think that the squid that we do, which is the squid with the tentacles, but you flatten it and you score it, and then when you put it on the grill, it curls up. When we do it with the red chili sauce and just a piece of lemon and some rucola. I think that might have been there on the first day. I think the lemon tart that we have was there on the first day, a caramel ice cream. And I think that probably, the pastas change every day, but it's not on the menu every day, but a pasta that we go back to over and over again when there are so many fancy and complicated pastas. We just love a pasta with slow cooked tomato sauce. For me, that's my go-to comfort food. And so I think the menu, it was fun because we had our birthday the other day, and our 38th birthday, and we gave everybody in the restaurant a copy of the very first menu because we still had it, and there were some things we really had a laugh at, mostly the prices. But there was a Papa Pomodoro on the very first day, quite a few complaints from customers saying, I didn't come here to have a bit of bread and tomato. And now, of course, it's changed.
I mean, your ears must ring a lot. The cliche when people are talking about you, your ears are ringing, because I talk to you, lots of people that know you, and the most resonating thing that comes back to me from the people that know you and frequent your restaurant is they feel home. They feel like when they come through the door, the River Cafe, they're in their home. They literally... They've got a group of people that are fun. You do such a great job with your staff. I want to talk a little bit about that. But you feel so welcomed, and you feel like you are now home and you're going to sit down and relax and have this great meal. So talk a little bit about that. How do you create that culture? Because I go to a lot of restaurants, Ruthie, and some of them are industrial, some of them are mechanical, some of them have great food, but they have like a time fuse on the table. They want to get you out of there pretty quickly to replace you at the table. But when people walk into the River Cafe, they feel like they have an extension of their own home. How did you manifest that? And tell us a little about how you talk to your staff about creating that atmosphere.
I think that, as to me, that is, the nicest thing that anybody could say. And thank you for that. I think why do people go to a restaurant when you could eat at home? You could order in. There's so many alternatives. And so, I think that people go to a restaurant because, in a way, maybe there are many reasons. But for us, I think we want people to feel that they're going to leave, for me, happier than maybe when they walked in. They'll feel that they have been looked after. They feel that they have of course, had something delicious to eat. And I think if you make an atmosphere where we welcome people, we don't obviously have a dress code. We don't say the way you have to be or look or behave, or it doesn't matter who you are, how much you're going to spend, that you are in our home, and we want it to be as welcoming as you would, and when somebody comes into my house, we greet them at the door. When they leave, we take them to the door. When they enter, we offer them a drink. When we listen to how they're feeling. And I often say to the waiters, and the staff, servers, as you call them, we don't know what these people experience today. They may have had bad news. Somebody in their family may be in trouble. They may have had great news. They may have had a promotion, or their daughter might be getting married. They may have saved up for quite a long time to come to the restaurant. They may want to share something. So I think I always think that when I look at the table, when I look at the restaurant from wherever I think everybody has a story. And I think everybody has a story. And for us, the other day I was there on a Sunday lunch, and it was so beautiful because there were some people, of course, who didn't know anyone, but there were some people, it was like a party almost. People were going from table to table. And I think that's something we really missed in COVID when restaurants were closed, was that spontaneous meeting of a friend. You walk in and, oh, there's someone I haven't seen for a long time, or come and sit with me for a bit, or how are you? And I think we're all in a room happy to be together. If you'd asked me before COVID, what was important in the city, I would say hospitals or bookstores or parks or obviously schools, museums. And I'm not sure I would have listed restaurants, but I think when we didn't have them, people really missed them.
It's about our togetherness, I think, and you've captured all of that, all the elements. The food is about our togetherness. It represents a cultural totem for us. I feel like when people are sitting down to a meal, there's usually a generally relaxed setting, if you will. And I want to flip it over to politics for a second, but not to get overly political, but just talk about a state dinner as an example.
Yeah.
Or about how food helps us get along with each other or builds a closer bond to each other, which could be from a state dinner to heads of state just sitting down and having a meal together, how that differentiates them from, like, saying, being in a conference room, Ruthie, where they're, it's a little colder, isn't it?
Yeah, I've seen that. You see, I've been to one state dinner at the White House, which was, it was with President Obama, and it was incredibly warm and kind. I've been to dinners at the embassy here when there's a president whose politics I appreciate. I find, it's a very worrying time right now.
Yeah, no question. Well, I feel that way, so we share that.
Yeah, I do. We share that. And it just is, at a time when we just want to be, together, when we want to, that's who we are. We're people who welcome people. We're people who take care of people. We're people who respect and, are dignified. And so what we're going through right now is deeply disturbing. But I think when you are around a table, when you have people sharing food, when you have people passing food, we often like to do plates of food that you pass around. You make eye contact. Very often, I always like to serve the person who's next to me before I take it for myself. And that kind of communication is saying, we're here together and we're taking care of each other. And that, I think, is a value that is lacking today, and I think it's there, but we just need to bring it out much more.
You've cooked for rock stars, you've cooked for presidents and prime ministers, you've cooked for award-winning Hollywood actors. If you're willing to talk about it, anyone from that whole group surprise you in a good or a bad way?
I think that, tonight I'm actually cooking for the Canadian Prime Minister, Mark.
Oh, Mark.
He's coming here tonight.
He's great friend of mine.
Friend.
We started at Goldman Sachs together, Mark and I.
Yeah.
So I know Prime Minister Carty for 30 plus years.
Yeah, it's his wife Diana's 60th birthday today, so we're having a birthday dinner for her here.
Well, if you get a chance,
And
give him my regard. Well, there you go.
course
There's
I
an
will.
example of a hell of a guy. What a wonderful guy he is.
Amazing person. So we knew and loved him because he was the governor of the Bank of England here. And I think, sometimes you have a table of people, well, if you have people who love to sing, sometimes we just start singing around the table, and that's, again, a shared experience. I think that, I can talk about the people who are, either great actors or great singers, but I think for me, whoever walks into the River Cafe, and we say that to whoever it is, comes to the River Cafe, we treat them as if they were, they are the most important people. And I think it does depend a lot on how the atmosphere is of the people who work for you. How do you treat the people who work for you? And that's as important to me as a culture. The people who serve at the table, the people who cook the food, the people who make the drinks, the people who wash the plates. You want to make a place that everybody wants to come to work. And I always think that's why I go to work every day, because I think also if they know how important it is for me to work every day, they'll want to come to work. And it's treating people as individuals. It's as simple as, treating through hope rather than fear. It's understanding what each person does best to his abilities or her creative talents. It's just using the River Cafe. If it's a home to the customer, we also want to be a family to the people who work there.
Anybody in history that you say, geez, I wish I had cooked for them? Anybody in mind?
Yeah. Nelson Mandela.
So you didn't get a chance to cook?
No, that was not a possibility. Yeah. But for me, to have had Mandela come into the restaurant would have been a huge honor. And we did cook for someone the other day who was very close to him. So there were a lot of, maybe that also brings up images of him. And I am a political person. I think about a society and politics and the big P of politics, how we can govern, how we can tell the truth, how we can, believe in people.
Yeah, and right or wrong policy as opposed to, what I love about you is just common sense. We're trying to make things better for people.
Yeah.
And raise living standards, which is important. We don't want to have too many have and have-nots. I think that creates levels of unfairness, and it reduces people's ability to think that they can attain things, So table 4 at the River Cafe, conversations about food and life. Tell us about the book. Tell us about what went into the book.
Well, we have this book. What's really nice is that we have, actually at the moment, we have 2 books. So we have Table 4 at the River Cafe, which is coming out in March. And then we have this new book. Can I tell you about this book, which is a book that I just finished, which is
actually the lemon
published.
Book?
Yes, so this is the lemon book.
Yeah,
but it's a book that I did with Ed Ruscha, great artist, and I've been asking Ed if we could do a book together for years, and he finally said, "Yes, Ruthie, if it's one ingredient." And if it's not too big. So this little book, it has 50 recipes, and every recipe has lemons as an ingredient. So, and he did these beautiful photographs of it. So that's come out. That's a very simple book that we've done. And as you asked the question about Table 4 at the River Cafe, that really is the story of the podcast, which we started. It was actually, during COVID when we wanted to reach out to people who were, not able to come to the River Cafe. And I thought of doing just a recipe every day, saying, let's just read a recipe every day. And then a friend of mine, Graydon Carter, your friend, said, Ruth, you're going to have to segue into a story. Why don't you try and think what more you can do with this? So in the first interviews, we did, I think the first one we did was with Paul McCartney, and all people who were so kind. Probably had little to do during COVID. Paul and Wes Anderson, I think Jake Gyllenhaal, And Michael Caine, that's right. And so we did those to practice and asked them to read a recipe that they loved and then to talk about their life through food. Did your mother cook? Did your father cook? Did you go to restaurants as a child? Did you cook for your children? What? And then the last question, and then stories come out of that. One of the things I've found is that very, very few people in my experience of the almost 200 interviews I've done, have grown up entitled. So they see food almost as a measure of their success. When they were able to order without looking at the prices, when Paul McCartney said he had a good glass of wine, when Trudy Styler described, having to keep potatoes under her bed as a child growing up. Elton John told us about shelling peas with his grandmother. So everybody, Nancy Pelosi, who we love, never ate a meal until she left home without a tablecloth. So food is revealing. Food tells you. So we did these, as I said, everyone has a story. So table 4 at the River Cafe, this book here, I don't know if this is being filmed, was approached by Amy Bell of Simon & Schuster and said, I listened to the podcast and I think it would be a book for people to read. So they chose I would have liked to have had everybody who's on a podcast, but the editors chose it was only from series 1, 2, and 3, I think. And the food is divided into food is family. So we have all the McCartneys. We have, who else do we have? We have the McCartneys. We have Salman Rushdie. We have my family. We have, and then we have food is tradition, people who grew up very much with their grandmothers or families. We have food is discovery, people who really discovered food later on in their life. Food is art, so we have painters, of course, Ed Ruscha. We have architects there, Norman Foster. We have Johnny Ive, the designer. Food is politics, Nancy, Al Gore. And others. And then we have food is food, which are the chefs from Alice Walters, Eric Ripar, chefs at the River Cafe. And so the book has the introduction. I always write an introduction to the guest and then, their story and a photograph of them, which is, that was challenging because all the photographs were taken at different times with different cameras, never thinking we were doing it for a book. So to make it consistent, we did them as kind of still lives on the table. And so it's a very simple book, but it is a book that you can take to your bed and read.
Well, I'm looking forward to getting it. Of course, I ordered it, and it doesn't hit the U.S. until March. But I'd love to get you back on when it comes out in March.
Okay, we can talk about more. Well, I'd love you to come back to the River Cafe.
Yeah, no, of course.
Come in the kitchen with me, and we'll cook
I'm going to be there. I'm going to be there in November. You have this wonderful way about you, Ruthie. When I came on your podcast, I don't know what you do to people, but I'll tell you what you did to me. You brought me in. We made a meal together. We were eating the meal, and all of a sudden, I felt like I was transformed back into my house of my upbringing, and we were talking about things that really moved me. And I brought up Jack Gruber, who's now passed, but
yes,
he was a Holocaust survivor, and about how he always waved his hand in front of his food, about the abundance he had now versus what was going on in the camp. And I know I'm bringing it up again today for a reason. There's something about you that you give to people, and it's the generosity of your heart, and it's the warmth of your personality, but it's the combination of all these things, and somehow it ties back into their ancestral home. I don't know how you do it, because you're doing it for people of all different walks of life and all different types of professions, but I feel like they come into your zip code, they come into your zone, and they plug into what you're about, which is love and grace and kindness and generosity and obviously great food. And so my question tied to this is, what do you do? When you wake up in the morning and you put the battle armor on to run the River Cafe or to be Ruthie Rogers, what goes through your head?
Well, I think, first of all, You're one of the nicest people. And I remember how we met immediately it was so easy, wasn't it? I met you, we started talking, we viewed the same place, and you're very affectionate, very kind. We don't have armor. We have, sometimes I think, the phrase it goes, through my head when people praise me. I think if only they knew, if only they knew how challenging life is as well, with our family, and we're always trying to do that. But yeah. So I think I wake up in the morning, and it depends. Sometimes I don't have time to think. I'm late and I have something to do, and a child is here, or a phone call has come through, and but I try to really think, look around me and think. And I know it sounds like a cliche, but I am very lucky. I'm lucky in people like you, people like my children, the people I work with, being so kind and so good. We all need help. Everybody needs, as I said, everybody has a story. I have stories, you have stories, and we know that, life is tough right now, and maybe always is. I know so many people who are worried about their children, worried about their work, worried about their finances, worried about their health, and it is something we all share and we all live with. And how we get through that is, I think, by really being there for each other. And yeah, I am lucky, and I am grateful to be, have help at my times of need, because we all have times of need and we all need help. And I have that from my family and my friends, and how lucky am I?
Yeah, amen. Right, we're down to the 5 words. So if you listen to my podcast, me and my producer, we come up with 5 words, and we ask our author to respond to the 5 words. I'm going to say the word, and you give me a sentence or two. So if I say the word home, Ruthie, what do you think about?
Safe.
Okay. And what about the word? Go ahead.
Yeah, I just feel that when you open that door, and you're home, you want to feel that you're in a safe place. It doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be protected by, I don't mean safe in the words that has gates or codes, but that you feel that you are in a safe place.
When I say the word resilience, what do you think about?
I think that in this age, and as I've come to think about life, I think that if I can teach my children and my grandchildren resilience, that is almost the greatest. I say 2 things: resilience and empathy. I think empathy and resilience is what we need to get through life.
Food. Say the word food.
Food. Oh, food. Well, that would be pleasure. It would be comfort. It would be love, really, a way of expressing love.
Man, it's beautiful. Rose Gray. I say the 2 words, Rose Gray. You say what?
I miss her. She was a force. You would have loved her. She was, so dynamic. She was such a great teacher. She was such fun, and, just as a partner, just brave and resilient and empathetic. So.
And the last word, and I'm going to give you the last word. I say the words, the River Cafe. What do you think of?
I want you to come there.
Yeah. Amen. Well, every time I come to London, that's my spot.
I want you to come. Well, you can come when I'm not here. I do think the River Cafe is all to do with the people who work there. I just have the greatest group of people who work, who come in the morning and try and make it a better place. That's all we want to do, is make the River Cafe better.
And how long you want to do it for, Ruthie? Are we going to be blessed with you at the River Cafe for many years to come?
I hope so. I'm going to, I say I'm going to die at my stove. Yeah.
Good. I like that. I feel the same way. So we got many books, many cookbooks, but the 2 that we're talking about today are Squeeze Me. That's the lemon recipes and art, and a new book coming out about your amazing podcast, which I will direct people to, Ruthie's Table 4, which is available on Spotify and Apple. And the title of that book is Table 4 at the River Cafe, Conversations about Food and Life by the legendary Ruthie Rogers. Thank you so much.
Thank
for
you.
coming on.
Thank you, Anthony.
Open book. And I'm going to see you soon.
I'm so good. I'm not going to see you this weekend, but I'm going to see you in November, right?
In November, I'm going to be there. Yep, I'm going to bring a group of
Okay.
my pals to come see you. I think we're underappreciating how fragile things are.
The global financial crisis, that was 2008, 2009. I can't tell you how many economists said that could never happen. It happened in the Great Depression, never going to happen again. Winding up to today, that the U.S. can never run into problems with its debt, because that never happens. But it did. It doesn't mean we know what's going to happen looking at history, but I think if you don't look at history, you forget what could happen.
Wow, the system is shakier than it looks. I don't know. Am I right about that, sir? Am I wrong about that? What say you? Welcome to Open Book. I am your host, Anthony Scaramucci. Joining us today, a best-selling author, New York Times best-selling author, Professor Ken Rogoff. He's a professor of economics at Harvard University and a former International Monetary Fund chief economist. The title of the book, Our Dollar, Your Problem, an insider's view of 7 turbulent decades of global finance and the road ahead. What a great title, though. Our Dollar, Your Problem. Ken, it's always a pleasure to be with you. Before we dive into this book, which is very timely, our listeners may not know your full background. We get a lot of young people on this podcast. So before the Harvard chair and the IMF credentials, give us a little bit about your journey and what shaped your view of global finance before you got into those more august positions.
Well, I worked at the Federal Reserve. That was my first job as an economist. I was a very junior economist. I think I met Paul Volcker. He was the chair once when I accidentally sat in his seat at lunch, and he is like 6'7", and I'm looking up at, and he goes, "That's my chair." But I didn't have a lot of other influence, but I did. I wrote the first paper about why you should have an independent central bank, back then. And then other things, but I had the office next to Ben Bernanke's. He was the Fed chair later at Princeton for a long time. Actually, in graduate school, we were office mates. And then I was a professional chess player in my youth. I represented the United States in the World Chess Championships, if you can believe that. That was a long time ago.
I first met you actually at the World Economic Forum. I came to hear you speak a few times. And then you wrote a great book. This has got to be 15 or 16 years ago now, called This Time is Different, which is about the, centuries of financial crises and how we handle financial crises. And it really influenced my investment theories. And it was, your suggestions about the Fed centrism and so forth in the book really helped me and probably other macro investors see the post-global financial crisis landscape. And so now this book, I feel like after reading that book a long time ago and reading this book recently, I feel like they're bookends in some ways. I just want to test that theory on you because we did something to the dollar. We used our flexibility, if you will, with interest rates, Operation Twist, quantitative easing, et cetera. And it's now put the rest of the world in a little bit of an imposition. And you have a great quote in this book, which actually becomes your title of this book, is from John Connolly. And for those that may remember John Connolly, in addition to being a former Treasury Secretary, he was also wounded in the Kennedy assassination. He was the governor of Texas and wounded in 1963, November. But one of the lines he had was the dollar is our currency, but your problem. Why is this so relevant today? Given the, and take us, if you don't mind, from the first book into this now aftermath of the financial crisis, 15, 16 years out.
This absolutely is a follow-up in some ways to the first book and about things that have happened since. And the title of the first book, This Time is Different, is supposed to be ironic, that people say, oh, don't worry about inflation. It's never going to happen again. China's growing to the moon. Hey, they're never going to have a problem. Look at how great they run their country. And something that's very pertinent today, even beside the dollar, is interest rates are super low. They're going to be super low forever. So I certainly hit on these themes where I appreciate your history shirt, by the way, where people look at, 10, 20 years and they think they've looked at everything that could ever happen. But a lot of times you need a longer arc of history because The global financial crisis, that was 2008, 2009. I can't tell you how many economists said that could never happen. It happened in the Great Depression, 1930s, never going to happen again. And then winding up to today, that the U.S. can never run into problems with its debt because that never happens, but it did, back in the 1930s. So, I think it's very important. It doesn't mean we know what's going to happen looking at history, but I think if you don't look at history, you forget what could happen.
I agree with all of that. I guess the thing that vexes me is we have these policy decisions that make it easy for our politicians. And I've heard you on other interviews, and I was dying to ask you this question. Will there be a Fed? And obviously there's a Fed right now that's being somewhat resistant to the Trump administration, doesn't want to get steamrolled by the Trump administration, wants to stay data dependent. But I would say the Fed, sir, and I would say the corruption of the dollar, if you don't mind me saying it that way, the Fed has given the politicians a little bit of an easy way out over the last 15 or 20 years. Is that just going to be the thing that happens? Will there be something deus ex machina that changes that? Or if you disagree with my observation of this, tell me why.
No, I think you're right. I don't think it's easy for the Fed to exercise its independence year in and year out when it's really under attack. And obviously, with the Trump administration, he's very blunt. He doesn't just say, I want Powell out. He says, I want to run it. I think I know better, not just than Powell, all the governors on the Fed. You should listen to me. And, that we could be right. I mean, we never know, but, it's a recipe for disaster. And the Fed has bent over the years. So when the title of the book, Our Dollar, Your Problem, comes from this period where we went off gold completely. We were kind of half off it, but we went off it completely. And that just led to the 70s. We got this huge inflation, and the Fed bent. They accommodated it. And you're absolutely right that under, the last 15 years, I don't want to get into the weeds here, but they basically bought up treasury bills by the, trillion. And that's held down interest rates. There's no question, but it doesn't work forever. So they bent to the government's will. But now, the government wants more. And just lastly, independent central banks is a new thing. It's not been around forever. I actually wrote the first paper on it, believe it or not. And, politicians have never liked it. The left doesn't like it either. If Harris had won and the progressives had their way, they wanted to get rid of the Fed too. So yeah, I'm worried about it.
I think I don't know. I guess I'm a Wall Street centric person. I've spent my most of my life on Wall Street. I feel like the independence of the Fed is something that is sacrosanct on Wall Street, which is why I think guys like Besant and others have gone to Trump. Steve Schwartzman has gone to Trump and said, knock it off, where Trump is now saying he's not going to fire Chairman Powell. But I want to play a very smuggy, I'm going to do some improvisation with you. I'm going to play a very smuggy politician / Fed economist. I'm going to test something out on you. I want you to respond to it.
Okay.
Okay. And so this is the what me worry smug Fed economist or a politician. What me worry. There's no other country like the United States. We have a 50-state free trading bloc, single currency, lots of flexibility in the country, lots of economic dynamism, lots of innovation. The Chinese are not going to be the dominant currency. The euro is really, let me just sniff at the euro for a second derogatorily. It's a fixed exchange rate mechanism more than it is a unified currency. And so what me worry as an American politician or a smuggy Fed economist about the potential demise of the dollar? What am I missing? Obviously, I'm setting this up for you, sir. What am I missing as Mr. Smug in terms of my feeling about America?
I love you're doing that because part of what really motivated me to write the book is I read the smugness, not just from politicians, but economic commentators. We are the greatest. There's nowhere else to go. But, we had the 70s when the dollar, Europe was the center of the dollar bloc in the just before then. We didn't have China. We didn't have Latin America. It was Europe. We lost Europe. We've lost it forever. We're, I think, going to lose a bunch of Asia if we screw up, which is half the dollar block. In the 1930s, we defaulted on our debt, something when we write the history books, we say we didn't, but we changed the price of gold from $20 an ounce to $35 an ounce. And if you were in London or in India holding dollars, kind of felt like a default. Of course we've defaulted. And the Supreme Court ultimately ruled it a default. So, there's this idea, again, not looking at history, that we just do whatever we want. We can run our debt to the moon. We can get rid of Fed independence. They're never going to get rid of us. It doesn't mean somebody's going to replace the dollar. That's not what happened in those episodes. But we lose a lot of our market. That means our interest rates are higher and our ability to use the dollar for sanctions and all this other stuff also drops. So we would feel that. And I think it's something that might have been going to happen anyway over a couple decades. But Trump is an accelerant of that process. There's no doubt about it.
You ever realize that you need to hire somebody yesterday? That's definitely happened to me before, and I wish I had used Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed's sponsored jobs, your listing jumps right to the top, so the right people actually see it, and fast. In fact, sponsored jobs on Indeed get 45% more applications than non-sponsored ones, according to Indeed data. One of the things I love about Indeed is how fast it makes hiring, and if I had this back then, I have saved several weeks of stress. And the best part, no subscriptions, no long-term contracts, just pay for results. Want to know how fast? In the minute I've been talking, 23 hires were made on Indeed. That's not hype, that's Indeed's data. There's no need to wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. Listeners of this show get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/openbook. Go to Indeed.com/openbook and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/openbook. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, Indeed is all you need. So 5 years from now, sir, where do you think we are? Fed, U.S. dollar? Is it more of the same? Are we going to be able to print 2 to 3 trillion, that'll be another 10 to 15 trillion dollars of deficit spending? Or are you be able to do that ad infinitum? You've written about, and I've heard you speak about, the corrosive effects of inflation and the regressive form of taxation that inflation represents. So, take us out 5 years. Tell me where we are, or tell me where you think we could be and what we should be worried about.
5 years, and I'm happy to come back on in 5 years. But I think in 5 years, we will have had some form of debt crisis. And it'll either take the form that instead of the Fed buying up $7 trillion in debt, they're buying up $25 trillion in debt, which is basically what Japan did, in their situation. We could have a burst of inflation. We could partially default on some of our debt, which Trump cabinet has talked about. But I think we're going to come under pressure. Now, Jamie Dimon, I'm sure said we're going to see a crack in the bond market. And I think he's right that at some point there'll be some, what we economists call nonlinearity, some sudden event. But I think what will happen before that is interest rates, long-term interest rates, are going to start creeping up. And Trump is president. He's very blunt, as you well know. But I think whoever's president is not going to like that. And then we start getting closer to what Jamie Dimon is talking about. But I think it will have happened within 5 years. I mean, in the book, I said 5 to 7 years. I would have rather you threw me 7 years. But I think 5 years more likely than not, that's going to happen. And it's not going to be pleasant for us. It's not going to be pleasant for the world.
I want you to react to this, sir. I was doing a little research. I'm trying to explain I grew up, as you know, in a blue collar working class family. And a lot of working class people don't understand inflation because, the number goes up. So in other words, if my parents buy a house for $16,000 in 1962 and Zillow says that their house is worth $750,000 today, they feel richer. But I said to my parents, over the dinner table, your house was 457 ounces of gold. Gold at $35 an ounce in 1962. Today, I could purchase that house on Zillow for 250 ounces of gold. It actually goes down in value from a gold per ounce perspective. And when I told my parents that, they got mad at me because, again, they want to feel the inflation makes, even though they're not richer, and even though the purchasing power has been woefully skewed since we took ourselves off the gold standard, how do you explain inflation to people that are not economists? Obviously, I majored in economics at Tufts. I've been in the markets for 36 years. You're one of the scions of economic theory. How do you explain it to somebody that is not us? Or how do you explain it to somebody that's the man or woman on the street?
Okay, not an easy question. I will say on the gold, which is an easy question, when Franklin Roosevelt put it from 20 to 35, people thought that was scandalous, making the dollar worthless. Now, I don't know what it is as we speak, but it hit 1,000 times that recently.
Yeah, it's 3,000. It's 3,000.
3,000. Yeah, I mean, just incredible. And you could point to a lot of things of how much inflation we've had. So, their prices go up and down. It's hard to control it exactly. Where we get concerned is where everything's going up. It happened in the pandemic. I mean, we saw pretty significant inflation, not as bad as in the 70s, believe it or not, but it was pretty significant. I think what people have trouble with is that, you go like the price of paper towels goes up from $10 to $25, and then it stays at, depends on where you buy it, at like $18 or $20. And the Fed says, "It's great. We solved it." And we say, what are you talking about? It's not $10 anymore. I don't feel like you solved it. So I think it is very upsetting, even to me as an economist. And I do go grocery shopping. I just can't get used to it. I know. I read the numbers. I know how much inflation went up. I kind of know. And by the way, believe me, my salary at Harvard did not go up that much. But yours maybe did. But I look at the things. When's it going to come down? I buy a loaf of bread. It had been this exact same loaf. It had been $3.50. And I just went and it's $6. And the Fed says, well, inflation has stopped. So I think it's definitely very distressing of how much it jumbles around prices. But what the Fed's supposed to do is not make you think about it. Like, there are little changes here and there. You feel good when your salary goes up a little bit. You don't notice when other things, but it's exactly when we're talking about it that they've got it wrong.
So well said. If I said to you that gold over the last 25 years, gold has outperformed the S&P 500, the best 500 companies in the United States, what would your reaction be to that?
Well, I mean, I follow it. Right. So I don't follow everything, but I follow that one. And, I think that partly reflects that central banks around the world, people around the world don't trust currencies. And that's just sort of common sense. I mean, it's absolutely some of the demand for crypto also. They don't trust the government. And if you're China, you really don't trust the United States. Look at the sanctions they're putting on everyone. So, there's a lot of reasons gold has gone up, but I like to say gold is the new gold. There are reasons it's done very well. It's the new reserve currency. I mean, if China could buy more of it, they would. So it's been remarkable, but I wouldn't say it shocked me. Every time gold goes up and the smug people say only stupid people buy gold, they're nuts. I mean, I actually tell central banks, I tell high net worth individuals at least, of course you should hold some gold. I mean, it's a diversification at the very least. I don't know you're going to outperform the S&P 500 again. You got to pick the dates to make that work. But yeah, it's remarkable.
I love the book because it took me down through some history that I didn't fully understand or appreciate. It also explained the fallibility, which you and I, as we get older, Ken, we know how fallible we are, right? It took me down the road of fallibility, where as a younger man, I would have talked with more certainty about things, and a lot of different things are going on here. What what I love about your writings, you don't just write from the ivory tower. You're sitting across some policymakers and heads of state, central bankers, and so forth. And when I closed the book, I was like, wow, the system is shakier than it looks. And I don't know, am I right about that, sir? Or, I mean, Ken, or am I wrong about that? I feel like the system is, I think we're under appreciating how fragile things are. What say you?
I absolutely. A few decisions differently at different times. The world could have gone a lot differently. The financial crisis could be worse. And I make a big point in the book of how lucky we were as Americans that it wasn't all how great we were. Europe made a bad mistake putting Greece in the euro, that they went from 26% of reserves to even now, only 20% of reserves. China decided to peg to the dollar and stuck to it too long. And you can go back to mistakes that Japan made, where they let us beat up on them more than they needed to. So you can point at mistakes where we've, risen very high. And I also think Americans don't realize it has been coming down for a while. Like your luck kind of, you get to control everything and your luck can start turning against you. And I think we're in a world today where our luck really could turn against us. I mean, some of the stuff we're doing, the tariff war, the war on the rule of law, part of why people like to hold American assets is you trust our courts. You don't think some president...
decentralized safe system is being stressed right now.
Exactly. A centralized system is not as safe. You're not looking to hold your money in a place where one person can decide, to upend you. So, I think there are a lot of concerns, and I think investors around the world have them.
All right, I'm down to the 5 words. And what we do is our very famous 5 words. I pick 5 words out of the book, and I ask our authors to opine. You give me a sentence or two. If I say the word inflation to you, you say what?
It's going to happen again.
You see, when I hear the word inflation, I think regressive tax. It really pains me because that's really what
for sure
what happens.
For sure, very regressive because richer people know how to get around it.
Exactly, and richer people can hold assets. My poor dad, he made his money with his time and labor. You're literally taking a part of his life away from him, and without any hedge, unfortunately. But when I say China, you say what?
It's not going to surpass the United States and this whole idea of a second China shock, and it's all over. They're amazing. It's formidable, but they're probably not even growing now. And I think they're headed for a long period of working their way out, probably eventually need to get rid of one-man rule themselves.
I say crypto, you say what?
I say tremendous innovation, but still the Wild West. I want to see a regulatory system, which I think would benefit crypto in the long run. What do you think? You're way more on top of this than I am.
Well, I mean, this is my podcast to talk to you, Ken Roth. But obviously I'm a bull on things like Bitcoin. I'm a bull on the future of digital. I just think that, Paul Atkins, who's a friend of mine, was explaining this earlier today on Squawk Box that our rail system can take us to T0, which is trades can happen and be affected on the same day. When I started in the business, they were T5, which was 5 trading days. They're now T1. And so, again, even Jamie, who thinks that Bitcoin is a Ponzi scheme, Jamie Dimon, who I think is one of the smartest people in our industry, accepts that there's going to be a role for the blockchain in the future of financial transactions. So I'm bullish. Well, let's talk about
you'd have to have your head in the sand not to think blockchains go back.
Yeah, exactly.
I think what people don't appreciate about Bitcoin the most is that there's a role in the global underground economy, which isn't all illegal. It's mostly tax evasion. And also in emerging markets where, again, they don't like the dollar. Mm-hmm. It's an asset people can hold. You're in an emerging market. Yes. You don't want your government to be able to take it away from you.
Yeah. And I think that's people in the West who, even though we have inflation and we're talking about all of this in your book, people in the West don't realize the pain that African citizens feel from their governments as they wipe out their net worth through their currencies, or things going on in South America. So there's a market outside of the Western liberal democracies for these assets. So, all right, last 2 words. Okay. The the second to last, power. I say the word power, sir. You say what?
Well, I think the dollar has been an incredible instrument of power, and some of the policies that we're engaging in now are taking it for granted, and we're going to miss it when it's gotten weaker.
The last word, and you get the last word on the last word, U.S. dollar.
The U.S. dollar is going to get knocked down a couple notches. We were luckier than we think to get where we are. But the way we're running the show on our debt, undermining Fed independence, trade wars, the dollar is not going to have the same stature in 10 years. No one will replace it, but it's going to have a much lower market share.
Well, I always enjoy my time with you, Professor
Same.
Ken Rogoff. It's always and this is a rigorous book, and I really encourage people to read it. It's very readable. You got a great writing style, but it also has reinforced for me some of the things I've been thinking about in terms of my investment thesis and where the world's going and what policies we could have in the U.S. to improve our position. So thank you for writing it. The title of the book is Our Dollar, Your Problem, an insider's view of 7 turbulent decades of global finance and the road ahead. Ken Rogoff, thank you so much for joining us on Open Book.